Iran just fired missiles at American soldiers. Right now, as you watch this, US military personnel across 4 countries in the Middle East are sheltering in place. The US 5th Fleet headquarters has been struck. Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the forward command center of the entire American military operation in the region, has been targeted. And 1 civilian in Abu Dhabi is already dead. The question every military strategist in the world is asking right now is the one nobody in Washington has yet answered publicly. Is the United States actually prepared for what Iran does next? We begin with the facts as they stand, confirmed by multiple agencies including Reuters, the Associated Press, CNN, and Al Jazeera as of this hour. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed it launched the first wave of retaliatory missiles and drones following the joint US and Israeli strikes on Iran earlier today. The IRGC named 4 specific targets: Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Salem Air Base in Kuwait, Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, and the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Bahrain's National Communications Center confirmed in an official statement that the 5th Fleet Service Center was subjected to a missile attack. The UAE Defense Ministry confirmed its air defenses intercepted a number of Iranian ballistic missiles and reported that shrapnel from those interceptions fell on a residential zone in Abu Dhabi, killing 1 person of Asian nationality. Qatar's defense ministry confirmed it intercepted 2 Iranian missiles using its Patriot air defense system. Explosions were heard across Doha. Kuwait reported sirens and explosions near Salem Air Base. The US Embassy in Bahrain issued an emergency security alert, urging all American citizens to shelter in place. The US Embassy in Abu Dhabi issued the same instruction. The US Embassy in Amman, Jordan, also implemented a shelter-in-place order for all its personnel, citing reports of potential missile or drone threats. The US Embassy in Israel had already advised American citizens to leave the country on Friday, before the strikes began. That detail matters. We will return to it. But first, we need to understand exactly what is at stake at each of these bases, because these are not abstract coordinates on a map. These are places where tens of thousands of American service members live and work every day, and their safety, right now, is not guaranteed. To understand why these 4 bases matter so profoundly, and why Iran chose them specifically, we need to step back and examine the architecture of American military power in the Gulf region. It is an architecture built over decades, and it is, without exaggeration, the operational backbone of everything the United States does militarily in the Middle East. Begin with Udeid Air Base in Qatar. This is not simply a base. It is the forward headquarters of United States Central Command, known as CENTCOM, the command that oversees all American military operations across the Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of South Asia. It is the nerve center. It is the place from which the broader campaign against Iran is being coordinated and directed. It houses thousands of US military personnel and a vast fleet of aircraft. When Iran targets Udeid, it is not striking a peripheral outpost. It is striking the operational brain of the American military campaign. Last June, during the 12-day conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran also struck Udeid. At that time, US warplanes were evacuated before the attack, and satellite imagery showed the base was largely emptied of aircraft prior to the Iranian strike. US officials reported minor damage and no casualties from that incident. Whether the same preparation occurred this time is not yet confirmed. Now consider the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. The 5th Fleet is responsible for naval operations across the Gulf, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, and parts of the Indian Ocean. It oversees the movement of American warships, the protection of commercial shipping lanes, and the deterrence of Iranian naval activity in some of the world's most strategically vital waterways. Smoke was visible rising from the Dhafra area of Manama, where the fleet's headquarters is located, in videos circulating on social media and reported by Reuters. The strategic implications of a successful strike on that headquarters are significant. Then there is Dhafra Air Base in the UAE and Salem Air Base in Kuwait, both of which host American military aircraft and personnel, and both of which have now been confirmed by Iranian state media as IRGC targets. The pattern is clear. Iran is not striking randomly. It is hitting the command infrastructure, the naval power, and the air assets that directly support the campaign against it. That is a strategic choice, and it reflects a level of prior planning and targeting capacity that deserves serious examination. But what does this retaliation tell us about Iran's actual military capabilities, and how does it compare to what the country was able to do before the US and Israeli strikes began? This is a question that military analysts will be working through in real time, and we must be careful to separate confirmed facts from reasonable inference. Here is what is confirmed. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps successfully launched a coordinated multi-country retaliatory strike within hours of being attacked. The strikes reached Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE simultaneously, indicating a pre-planned, dispersed launch capability that had been held in reserve. Iran also launched a parallel wave of missiles and drones toward Israel, with the Israeli military confirming it detected multiple launches and activated its air defense systems. Sirens sounded across northern Israel, and then, approximately 2 hours after the initial Iranian response, across central Israel, including Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. What we do not yet know is the precise extent of damage at each base. The US Department of Defense has not issued a statement on damage or casualties as of this reporting. That silence is itself noteworthy, and it may indicate that the situation is still too fluid for a formal assessment, or that damage is being assessed before any public communication. What we can say with confidence, based on pattern and precedent, is this. Iran's missile program, even after the strikes it absorbed in June of last year during Operation Rising Lion, and even after the strikes it has absorbed today, retains a meaningful launch capability. The Israeli military's own statement this morning acknowledged that Iran had continued efforts to rehabilitate its missile production in the months since that prior campaign. Iran was not caught entirely unprepared. And the breadth of today's retaliatory strikes, spanning 4 countries and targeting the command infrastructure of the American military simultaneously, reflects an organization that had contingency plans in place long before the first bomb fell on Tehran this morning. Now we turn to a question that is not only military but deeply human. There are tens of thousands of American service members stationed across these bases, and their families are watching this unfold from homes in Texas, Virginia, California, and dozens of other states. President Trump himself acknowledged in his video statement this morning that American lives may be lost. Those are not abstract words. They represent a president publicly accepting the possibility of US military casualties in a conflict that has now extended across 6 countries simultaneously. What is the plan to protect those personnel? Here is what the confirmed record shows. Before the strikes began, the US Embassy in Israel urged American citizens to leave the country. That advisory came on Friday, the day before the operation launched. It indicates that at the command level, the possibility of Iranian retaliation was anticipated, and that some protective steps were taken in advance for civilian personnel. At the base level, the precedent from June 2025 is instructive. When Iran struck Al Udeid during the 12-day war, aircraft were evacuated beforehand. Whether that same evacuation protocol was activated this time is not confirmed. Republic World reported, citing unspecified sources, that US assets were repositioned, including ships departing Bahrain's piers and aircraft movements from Al Udeid, in anticipation of further escalation. That report has not been confirmed by US military officials. What is confirmed is that emergency shelter-in-place orders were issued across 4 US embassies in the region simultaneously, which indicates a coordinated anticipatory response, not a reactive one. But it also raises an uncomfortable question. If the US government anticipated Iranian retaliation and took steps to protect its civilian personnel, what was the calculus applied to the military personnel who remained at those bases? That question has not been answered publicly, and it is one that Congress, the press, and the American public have every right to ask. Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona, an Iraq war veteran, was among the first elected officials to respond, reflecting the concern of lawmakers who understand from experience what it means when American troops are under fire in a foreign country, without a clearly defined exit strategy. There is another dimension of this story that has received less attention than the missile exchanges, and it may ultimately matter more than any single strike or counterstrike. The Gulf Arab states that are now under Iranian attack are not combatants in this conflict. Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE did not participate in the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. They host American bases as part of long-standing security partnerships that were built on an implicit guarantee that the presence of American forces on their soil would deter rather than invite attack. That guarantee has now been tested, and the results are consequential. The UAE called Iran's attack a flagrant violation of national sovereignty and international law, and stated it reserves its full right to respond to this escalation. That is diplomatic language, but it carries real weight. Bahrain described the strike on the Fifth Fleet headquarters as treacherous and a blatant violation of the kingdom's sovereignty and security. Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE have all closed their airspace. Qatar Airways has suspended flights. Major international carriers, including Lufthansa, have halted service to and from Tel Aviv, Beirut, and Oman. The commercial aviation network that connects the Gulf to the rest of the world has effectively shut down. There is one confirmed civilian death, a person of Asian nationality in Abu Dhabi, killed by shrapnel from an intercepted Iranian missile. And here is the strategic dimension that matters most for the long term. These Gulf states chose to host American bases because they calculated that the benefits of that relationship outweighed the risks. Today, one of those states buried a civilian killed by shrapnel from a missile that was aimed at an American installation on their soil. That calculation is now being reassessed in real time in palaces and cabinet rooms across the Gulf. And the outcome of that reassessment will shape the regional security architecture for a generation. We must now address directly what the US military posture in the region tells us about preparation and readiness for precisely this scenario, because the record on this point is both important and instructive. In the weeks leading up to today's strikes, the United States assembled what CNN described as the largest military buildup in the Middle East since the onset of the Iraq War. Aircraft carriers, warships, fighter jets, and ground-based air defense systems were positioned across the region. That buildup served two purposes simultaneously. It was intended to pressure Iran into a nuclear deal through coercive diplomacy, and it was the strike force that ultimately executed today's campaign. But preparation for offense and preparation for the defense of forward-deployed personnel are not the same thing. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, had been privately warning senior officials about the potential downsides of a prolonged conflict with Iran, raising concerns specifically about scale, complexity, and the potential for US casualties, according to CNN reporting published before the strikes began. Those concerns were documented, communicated through the chain of command, and reported by credible outlets. They were not reflected in any public statement from the administration. The administration went ahead, and now, within hours of the first American bombs falling on Tehran, Iranian missiles are landing on American military installations across 4 countries. The question of whether the US was adequately prepared for this specific contingency, the rapid, multi-country, simultaneous targeting of American bases, will be the subject of congressional hearings, Inspector General investigations, and military after-action reviews for years to come. What we can say right now, based on the confirmed record, is that the possibility of exactly this scenario was raised internally by the military's own senior leadership before the decision was made. That is a fact that belongs in this report, stated plainly and without judgment. We turn now to where this goes from here, and this is the section of our reporting where we must be most disciplined about separating confirmed information from analysis, and analysis from speculation. What is confirmed? Iran has described today's retaliatory strikes as its first wave. That phrase, first wave, is not ambiguous. It signals intent to continue. A senior Iranian official stated that all American and Israeli assets and interests in the Middle East have become legitimate targets, and added explicitly that there are no red lines after this aggression. The Iranian Foreign Ministry posted on social media that the country will not hesitate in its response. The Iranian-backed Houthi movement in Yemen, according to two senior Houthi officials speaking to AFP on condition of anonymity pending an official announcement, has vowed to resume attacks on Red Sea shipping routes and on Israel. If that vow is carried out, it will add a third front to a conflict that is already stretching American military and diplomatic resources across the region. What is not yet confirmed, whether the US intends to retaliate against Iran's retaliatory strikes, and if so, at what scale and targeting profile. What the operational plan for the coming days looks like beyond the initial campaign, whether any of the senior Iranian leadership targeted this morning, including Supreme Leader Khamenei, were killed or injured, and whether any of the Gulf states now under attack will seek to invoke mutual defense arrangements with the United States that could formally expand the conflict's scope. What reasonable, evidence-based analysis can offer is this. A conflict that began this morning as a joint US-Israeli military campaign has already, within hours, become a multi-country regional engagement with confirmed civilian casualties, disrupted global aviation, and a declared Iranian intent to continue striking American targets. The gap between the stated objective, destroying Iran's missiles and changing its government, and the actual operational environment, a rapidly expanding regional conflict with no defined endpoint, is one that the administration has not yet publicly addressed. And so we arrive at the question that this report set out to answer. Is the United States ready for what comes next? Based on the confirmed reporting available as of this hour, here is an honest accounting. The US military assembled significant strike capability and executed a large-scale coordinated operation. Some protective measures for civilian personnel appear to have been taken before the strikes began. Air defense systems across the Gulf are operational and have intercepted Iranian missiles. But Iran has retained enough missile capability to strike 4 countries simultaneously on the same day it was attacked. American bases have been hit. At least 1 civilian is dead on the soil of a US ally. The US Department of Defense has not issued a public statement on damage, casualties, or the next phase of operations. Congress was not briefed before the strikes. No formal exit strategy or endpoint has been communicated publicly, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs had documented reservations about this mission before it began. Whether the US is ready for what comes next is a question that can only be answered fully in the coming hours and days as damage assessments come in, as Iran's next moves become clear, and as the Gulf states recalibrate their own positions. But the evidence available right now does not support a conclusion of comprehensive preparedness. It supports a conclusion of consequential action taken with significant documented risk and with outcomes that are, as of this moment, genuinely uncertain. We close with the facts that matter most to the people who matter most. The men and women in uniform currently sheltering in place at bases across the Middle East, and the families watching from home. Iran struck 4 American military installations today. 1 civilian is confirmed dead. Embassies across the region have told Americans to stay indoors. Iran has promised more. The US has not publicly responded to the question of what happens if it does. The Middle East is not on the edge of a regional conflict. It is already inside one. What shape that conflict takes, how long it lasts, and at what human cost, remains the most important open question in the world right now. We will keep reporting as the facts emerge. Stay with us.